Well, University of East London was one of the first universities to set up a coaching psychology program. And we have a particular interest at the moment in coaching in educational settings. So what is the application of coaching within educational settings? I think it's particularly significant now because of all the change going on in the educational sector and actually in wider society. Coaching is a fantastic way of connecting with people, helping them to become more independent, more resilient, and perhaps more reflective. So, and the other thing to say is there's an obvious link between what people are trying to do in education and what people are trying to do in coaching. Both are about learning, both are about unlocking human potential.
The end outcome of whatever project I've been doing sort of is far richer if you've been able to have that contact with people and work with them in a much more productive way. So, I mean, in many different projects I've been doing, it's those skills that we learnt in coaching have really helped.
They weren't all high achievers, the coaches, but there were other students who came to it simply because they wanted to, and you could see great gains in confidence there too.
We have a lot of research evidence coming up, which is telling us that coaching does make a difference to the lives and aspirations of young people. For example, some research has shown us that coaching can increase resilience in young people. It can increase hopefulness, both, really important attributes in this day and age. There's even evidence to show that coaching or training people to become coaches makes them better practitioners. I'm thinking of staff in this instance. So training members of staff in a school to become a coach can make them better practitioners. So a head teacher trained to be a coach becomes a better head teacher.
And we found amazing results, particularly from our post-16 students, working alongside experienced coaching coaches to actually really enhance their skills as individuals and as human beings.
It's actually quite simple, because the way we see it, there's three elements for me of successful coaching. One is you need a certain set of skills to be a good coach, and those skills are skills that most people, I'd say all people in schools, have already. The skills of asking good questions, the skills of challenging others, the skills of giving feedback, the skills of active listening. So those skills are there already. They just need to be honed. The other important element is a process, because what we need to ensure is that coaching isn't just a conversation. It needs to be a conversation that leads to a different way of thinking or different behaviors. So you do need a process. But having said that, the processes are very simple. You can learn a process in half an hour. You can pick up a book on different coaching processes or coaching models. And for me, the most important one is the third element, which is the way of being. And that, for me, is the critical part of it. And again, I think we're lucky in schools, because most people who come into this profession, I think, bring that way of being with them. And that way of being for coaching is about being non-judgmental, being quite generous, being curious, and importantly, believing in others.
Christian explained what it would entail, training sixth formers to coach peers or younger students with a view to, well, raising attainment really in the first instance. But to use a cliche, it was a no-brainer. Here was somebody, an expert in the field, coming in and saying, we can use the coaching approach, which staff are getting more familiar with students, and if it helped to grow the coaching culture within the school and all the benefits that I think that can bring to individuals and an institution, I thought, let's go for it.
It was great. I mean, we sort of underwent a course that was 3 days that we did over a couple of months, and each of the different times we came back, you could really feel yourself sort of advancing a bit further, because we started on looking at empathy, looking at how sort of rapport and just interacting with one another within the group. Then we looked a bit more of the psychology of it, the sort of what questions can you ask someone, whether it's a leading question or an open question, really learning to interact with each other in a way that sort of really encouraged people to sort of find answers to problems. And then on the third day, it was amazing when we actually sat down to do the coaching. It all suddenly came together, and it all worked, and you could see the different things we learned all coming in together. So that was helpful.
I think one of the best models to use in schools is the GROW model. It's a very popular coaching model. It's used out in most of the business world. It's probably the most often used coaching model. The very process leads to improved outcomes. It's a 4-stage model, and it spells out GROW. That's why it's called the GROW model. The 4 stages are G for goal, where we ask the coachee to be clear about what the goal is. Then we move on to R, which is for reality. That's the current reality. So what we're trying to find out is what's going on at the moment. The O is a very important stage. That's the option stage, where what we do as the coach is generate as many options as possible. We want the coachee to feel like they have lots of choices. And finally, the W, the way forward, is about getting the coachee to commit to at least one small step towards their goal. I'll talk a little bit about each process now. The first stage, the goal stage, is where we're trying to get the coachee to think about what it is they want to achieve. It's important to split this into 2 parts. One is, what is their overall objective? So what is it overall that they're seeking coaching for? What is it they want to get out of the coaching process? And the other part of it is, what is it they'd like to achieve by the end of this session that they're in at the moment? So we split it into those 2 things. Then we move into the reality phase. All of this is done through asking questions, not giving advice, not telling people what to do, but asking open questions. So in the reality phase, what we're doing is trying to find out as much as we can about the context the coachee is in. And it's not for our benefit. It's not so that we can understand in order to solve their problem. It's really for them to see things maybe differently. So we're asking insightful questions. We're focusing in on positives where possible to get them to see things slightly differently. So once we've decided what the goal is, we've looked at what it's like at the moment, then we get to the important part, which is the option stage. What we want is for the coachee to feel that they have lots of options. We want them to feel like an actor rather than a victim in whatever situation they're in. And for that, for them to feel they have a lot of different options is very important. So at this stage, we ask a lot of questions. We keep probing them for new ideas. What else could you do? We might write things on a bit of paper or do other creative activities to help them broaden the number of options they've got. Once we've increased those options, which is essential in coaching, we help them to evaluate those and pick which of the number of options they've got that they want to pursue. That takes us into the way forward stage, which is simply coming up with an action plan. If that's the option they've chosen, what are they going to do? Very important that by the end of a coaching session, they leave either thinking differently about the situation or coming up with particular new behaviors that will get them closer to that goal they talked about initially.
For me, the biggest benefit, and this doesn't come as a sideshow, I always knew this would be the case, but it was absolutely remarkable to see it, was in the coaches themselves. The buzz that they had, from doing the training, the sense of community as a community of coaches within the school that they had, having done the training. And then just the benefits in confidence. Also, again, they were coaches, but having gone through the process, the thought processes of the GROW model, being able to talk themselves through problems as well. We
want to become a school that has coaching written like Blackpool through a stick of rock, really. It's actually very, very important for us because it actually develops us as individuals, us as a school, and the teams within the school.
Well, I think if I were going to pick one thing, it's that coaching can raise aspirations. Often when I coach adults and I ask them, what's the one event that really changed their lives? Many people reflect back to their time at school and they remember one teacher or one adult in school that made a profound impact on them and really changed the way they saw themselves. And when I ask, what is it that did that? What behavior led to this new way of thinking? It's always about, they say, well, that person believed in me. They saw something in me that I didn't see. And that can have such a profound impact on a young person. And I think in schools, we all have the ability to provide that kind of coaching way of seeing things.